There's something powerful about being guided without even realizing it. Some people chase after connection, they chase approval, they force relationships. But others, they just align. They don't run after people, they move toward purpose, and somehow the right people meet them there. That's not coincidence, that's not just being lucky. It's what happens when someone begins to trust the journey more than the crowd. When a woman is spiritually protected, her life starts to attract differently, not because she's louder or more noticeable, but because she's grounded. And grounded people have a frequency. You can't fake it, you can't manipulate it, you either carry it or you don't. She's not interested in surrounding herself with people who flatter her. She's drawn to those who sharpen her. People who challenge her to become more honest, more whole, more aware. And those kinds of people don't just show up by accident. They come through alignment. It's a result of her letting go of environments that felt familiar but weren't healthy. What's beautiful is that she doesn't have to search frantically anymore. She used to. She used to try to fit in, to prove her worth, to water herself down just to be accepted. But now she knows better. Now she simply shows up fully, and in doing so, she makes it clear who belongs in her space and who doesn't. The right people recognize her value without her having to explain it. They don't feel threatened by her strength. They don't shrink her to feel taller. They see her light and want to add to it, not dim it. And when she meets them, she doesn't question it. She doesn't overthink or doubt their presence, because real connection feels easy, not lazy, but easy. Effort with flow. And here's what's important. The right people don't just help her feel seen, they help her stay centered. They remind her who she is when the world tries to make her forget. They don't just show up in good times either. They stay when it's hard. They speak life when it's dark, and she learns to do the same for them. It's not always a large circle. In fact, it rarely is. Protection doesn't mean popularity. It means alignment. It means her circle is intentional, small but solid. She's not collecting contacts, she's cultivating connection. And that shift alone is a sign she's walking a different path. But this kind of clarity doesn't come unless she first understands her own worth. That's where everything begins. Self-worth isn't built on how others see her. It's built on how she sees herself when no one's looking. And when that foundation is strong, it changes the way she moves through the world. There's a kind of woman who walks into a room and doesn't need attention to feel valuable. She doesn't dress for approval. She doesn't speak to impress. She's not calculating every move based on who's watching. She simply exists in her truth. And that's what makes her unforgettable. She's not loud. She's clear. She doesn't seek to dominate. She seeks to align. And because she's not trying to prove anything, she doesn't crumble under pressure. She's been through enough to know that the world's opinions are unstable, unreliable, and ever-changing. So she stopped basing her worth on something so fragile. She remembers when she used to doubt herself, when she used to replay every conversation, wondering if she was too much or not enough. But she grew tired of shrinking, tired of second-guessing her own voice. Eventually, she realized something simple but life-changing. She was never too much. She was just in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Now she speaks differently. She moves differently. She no longer needs to be liked to feel validated. That's what makes her so steady, because when a woman knows her worth, she becomes immune to certain kinds of manipulation. She's not easily flattered. She's not easily fooled. Compliments don't sway her, and criticism doesn't break her. She sees herself through a deeper lens. She values her growth. She respects her process. And she understands that her worth isn't tied to her past mistakes or current status. It's rooted in her essence, unchanging and untouchable. This kind of self-worth is magnetic. It draws in the right energy, not because she's trying, but because she's aligned. She's no longer performing, she's just being, and that's enough. And when she combines this inner knowing with her ability to recognize the people who truly support her growth, she becomes harder to distract and even harder to derail. She has clarity, not perfection, but peace. Not certainty about every step, but confidence in the direction she's going. She doesn't need a crowd, she doesn't need applause, she needs connection, she needs truth, and she needs purpose. Those three things sustain her more than validation ever could. This is what happens when protection meets identity. She stops chasing, she starts attracting. Not from a place of need, but from a place of knowing. There's a moment when a person stops living in reaction and starts living in intention. That shift changes everything. For a woman who is walking in alignment, who is protected not just physically but spiritually, that moment becomes her baseline. She no longer waits for chaos to wake her up. She no longer lets external noise dictate her next move. She is drawn to clarity. And more importantly, she draws clarity to herself. Drama doesn't find her like it used to. Not because the world has changed, but because she has. Chaos used to be familiar. Conflict used to be normal. It wasn't that she wanted it. She just didn't realize peace was an option. She thought that the tension, the constant firefighting, the emotional roller coasters were just part of life. But now she knows better. She's tasted peace. And once you've tasted peace, dysfunction starts to feel suffocating. Purpose has a different energy. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand constant attention. It moves with quiet confidence, and she's learned to move with it. It's not that life is suddenly perfect or painless. It's that her compass has changed. She doesn't wake up asking, "What do I have to survive today?" She wakes up asking, "What am I building today?" That shift changes what she notices, what she tolerates, what she invites in. People used to show up with their chaos and pull her in. They'd bring drama dressed as urgency, crisis disguised as connection. But she doesn't engage with it the same way anymore, not because she doesn't care, but because she's committed to something deeper. When you're living in purpose, you don't have the emotional bandwidth for meaningless battles. You learn to protect your energy, not out of selfishness, but out of stewardship. And the most beautiful part is this: when drama no longer feels like home, purpose becomes the default. She begins to notice opportunities that serve her growth, conversations that open new doors, people who aren't impressed by her potential, but committed to her process. That's the difference. She's no longer chasing short-term highs. She's building long-term impact. But it would be a lie to say this happens without resistance. Purpose doesn't eliminate adversity. It reframes it. The protected woman isn't spared from hardship. She's strengthened through it. Resilience isn't something she talks about. It's something she lives. Over and over again, there are seasons where everything breaks, doors shut, friends leave, plans fall through, and people around her ask, "How are you still standing?" What they don't understand is that she doesn't stand on circumstances. She stands on something deeper. She's been through enough to know that adversity isn't the enemy, it's the trainer. And every setback has sharpened her. There's a strength that doesn't come from winning. It comes from rebuilding. When you've lost what you thought you needed and survived it, you become unshakable. And not in a loud, aggressive way, but in a quiet, undeniable way. You walk into rooms differently. You speak differently because you know who you are. And nothing builds that like adversity. Most people try to avoid pain. She doesn't chase it, but she doesn't run from it either. She leans in. She asks different questions. Not why is this happening to me, but what is this shaping in me? That shift turns adversity into growth, and growth into wisdom. What once would have broken her now builds her. What used to shake her now centers her. Because every trial taught her something the easy path never could. She's learned how to sit with discomfort without losing herself, how to walk through the fire and come out with her character intact. That's not accidental, that's developed, that's earned. People often assume resilience looks like brute force, like pushing harder, doing more, never stopping. But her resilience looks different. It looks like grace, like rest, like knowing when to let go. Because sometimes the strongest move is surrender. And sometimes the greatest power is found in knowing when not to fight. She doesn't wear her scars like shame. She wears them like armor, not to prove anything, but to remember. To remember how far she's come. To remember the nights she cried but still got up the next morning. To remember the times she almost settled but didn't. And because of that, she no longer doubts herself when the next challenge appears. She doesn't panic, she prepares. She doesn't question her ability to rise, she remembers that she already has, again and again. Her faith isn't just theory, it's muscle memory. Her resilience isn't just a quote, it's a lifestyle. When you put all of this together, her ability to attract peace over chaos, to hold her vision through adversity, you begin to understand what protection really looks like. It's not a bubble, it's not immunity from life, it's the ability to walk through anything and still remain whole. She's not here to avoid the storm, she's here to walk through it with purpose. And she does, every time. There's something extraordinary about people who walk through storms and don't get wet, not because the rain didn't fall, but because they were covered. There's something remarkable about people who trust their gut, especially women. It's not magic, it's not mystery, it's something far more real, something rooted in experience, observation, pattern recognition, and yes, a little bit of something higher. You see, we all have that voice inside us, that quiet, persistent whisper that nudges us in a certain direction, the one that tells you, don't go there, or something's off about this person, even when everything on the surface seems fine. Most people learn to silence that voice. We rationalize, we override, we listen to the noise of the world instead of the signal within. But a woman who is protected has learned to do the opposite. She listens, and not just when it's easy or convenient, but especially when it's inconvenient. She understands that her intuition is not a weakness or a fluke. It's a form of internal intelligence, a survival tool sharpened by life, pain, and spiritual awareness. What's fascinating is how often intuition shows up not as a dramatic alarm, but as a subtle feeling, a twitch in the gut, a shift in the atmosphere, a moment where she suddenly feels like she shouldn't be there. And most people around her might say, you're being paranoid, or he seems nice, or why not take the job? But her soul knows something deeper. And while others need evidence, she only needs alignment. The reason this matters, why it's so powerful, is because evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it looks like charm, it talks sweet, it makes promises, but intuition, it sees what the eyes can't. It reads beneath the surface, and it never lies. Now, of course, that voice isn't always loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It waits for you to get still enough to hear it. That's why the protected woman isn't constantly busy trying to prove things. She doesn't need to rush into everything. She knows when to pause, when to step back, when to ask, not is this good, but rather, is this right for me? That difference is everything. So many people end up in painful places because they ignored the warning signs, not because they didn't see them, but because they didn't trust themselves. They gave someone the benefit of the doubt when their soul was begging them to walk away. The protected woman, she's been there before. She's learned the cost of not listening. And now she treats that inner signal like sacred GPS. She doesn't need to understand why. She only needs to obey it. But here's what makes her different still. It's not just her ability to sense danger. It's how she carries herself when danger is near. While others panic, she holds peace. And not the kind of peace that comes from perfect circumstances. That's not peace. That's comfort. Real peace, the unexplainable kind, doesn't depend on conditions. It lives in spite of them. You've seen it. That woman who just lost everything, and somehow she's still smiling. The one who's walking through betrayal, and somehow she's still calm. That's not numbness, that's not denial, that's alignment. It's the kind of inner stillness that says, I don't know what's ahead, but I know who's with me. There are moments in life where everything breaks around you. Relationships end, money dries up, people you trusted turn out to be someone else entirely, and most would crumble. But some don't. Some stand taller, not because they're stronger, but because they're anchored in something beyond themselves. That kind of peace can't be faked. It can't be taught in books. It's earned in the fire. It's the result of walking through storms and discovering you're not alone. And once a woman knows that, truly knows that, she becomes dangerous in the best way. Because you can't manipulate her with fear. You can't control her with chaos. You can't bait her with drama. She's not moved by noise. She's moved by truth. And that truth is what shields her from the schemes of people who seek to harm or use her. It's ironic, really. The same peace that attracts good people repels the wrong ones. Not because she's doing anything aggressive, but because peace is power. Evil doesn't know what to do with someone it can't disturb. The toxic will try to provoke her, test her, get a reaction, and when they can't shake her spirit, they leave, not because she fought them, but because she didn't need to. This is how protection works, not always by locking the doors or building the walls, but by building the kind of spirit that doesn't break easily, by forming the kind of soul that listens to the quiet voice and rests in the quiet strength. Intuition tells her where not to go. Peace keeps her grounded where she is. Together, they guide her through life in ways most people will never understand. And honestly, they don't have to. She knows, and that's enough. Sometimes protection doesn't come in the form we expect. We imagine it as a hand holding us back from danger or a clear warning sign with flashing lights. But more often, it comes quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. It shows up as distance, as detachment, as a shift in who calls, who texts, who stays, and who disappears. One of the most underappreciated signs that someone is being protected is when people with bad intentions start falling away from their life without explanation. It doesn't always feel good in the moment. It might look like rejection, it might feel like abandonment, but it's not. It's alignment. It's clarity in disguise. Toxic people don't always reveal themselves with obvious behavior. Some come dressed in charm, pretending to care, pretending to support. But their intentions tell a different story. And when a woman is covered, when she's spiritually protected, something in her atmosphere repels what isn't meant for her. Not because she fights it, not because she calls it out, but because she outgrows it. This is where it gets fascinating. She doesn't always even have to say anything. Her growth speaks for her. Her boundaries speak for her. And those who came to drain, distract, or manipulate begin to feel out of place. They either try harder to control, or they quietly slip away. Most people think that's a loss, but it's not. It's a filter. It's life sorting itself out on her behalf. She doesn't need to slam the door or create drama. In fact, she rarely does. She simply evolves. And the people who can't meet her there either adjust or exit. That's not harshness. It's spiritual immunity. It's what happens when someone becomes too whole to entertain half-hearted relationships. Now, there's a misconception that protection always feels peaceful, but it can feel painful at first, especially when someone you loved or trusted fades out without closure. It's tempting to chase that closure, to ask why, to seek answers, but here's the truth most won't say out loud. Sometimes you don't get the answers because you don't need them. The removal was the answer. The silence was the shield. And the more a woman learns to accept that, the stronger she becomes. She begins to see patterns. She notices how every time she steps into a new level of herself, certain people just can't come with her. Not because she's better than them, but because she's becoming someone who refuses to shrink to fit back into places that made her small. Then there's the other side of this. When doors start to close, it's frustrating, it's confusing, it challenges everything we think we know about timing and effort. Because we've been taught that if we just work harder, knock louder, stay longer, eventually things will open. But here's the truth that changes everything. Sometimes the door doesn't open because it's not safe on the other side. That opportunity that seemed perfect, that job that looked like a breakthrough, that relationship that felt like the answer, when it suddenly disappears, we feel like we've failed. But maybe it wasn't failure. Maybe it was intervention. Maybe the delay, the denial, the detour was the protection. See, most people only trust what they can see. But those who are truly guided learn to trust what they sense. And they learn to think closed doors not out of superstition, but out of wisdom. Because behind every no is a yes to something better aligned. Every time the door didn't open, it was often because what was behind it would have cost her more than it gave. This is hard to accept when we're in it. It's hard when your heart is set on something and suddenly it slips away. But there's a pattern here. And if she pays attention, she'll notice that every time something was removed, it created space for something greater to enter. Not always immediately, but inevitably. The woman who is protected doesn't just push forward blindly. She pays attention to resistance. She watches for redirection. She doesn't force things anymore. She's learned that if she has to lose herself to make something work, then it's probably not hers to begin with. Closed doors teach her to trust timing, not just effort. They remind her that her path is curated, not chaotic. And even when she doesn't understand why something ended or never began, she carries a quiet confidence that it was for her good, that she was spared something she'll never have to recover from. Eventually, she stops mourning what didn't happen. She stops begging to be let in, because she knows that what's meant for her won't require her to beg. It will recognize her. It will respect her. And more importantly, it will preserve her peace, not steal it. This way of living isn't passive. It's powerful. It's the kind of clarity that can't be manipulated. Because she's no longer just chasing outcomes. She's watching for signs. She's listening to that inner radar. And when people leave or doors close, she doesn't crumble. She recognizes that something somewhere is working on her behalf. That's the beauty of divine protection. It doesn't always tell you what's wrong. Sometimes it just removes what doesn't belong.